Talking to her supporters. We do understand we have translation now. Let's listen in.
I'd like to convey to you, compatriots, my greatest gratitude. The first stage, which will lead the French to the Élysée, is now completed. It is a historic moment. And I assume the immense responsibility now of the defense of the French Republic, its unity, its security, its culture, its prosperity, and its independence. And I also see it as an act of French pride, that of a people who is raising its head and who is trustful of the future, confident in the future. The system has tried through all its ways, dubious as they are, to thwart our victory. But now the great debate is going to be held. The French people must seize this opportunity because the enormous challenge of this election is the wild globalization which puts our civilization at risk. Either we continue to disintegrate without any borders, without any controls, delocalization, unfair international competition, mass immigration, and the free circulation of terrorists, or you choose France, with borders which protect our industries, our people, and national security. You do have the
Marine Le Pen there talked to her supporters and essentially pressed that she will continue on to that runoff election. This is the second part of French elections. It is scheduled for May 7th. I want to bring in Cyril Vanier. He is a CNN international anchor and also a native of France. So you say that, you know, maybe a year ago, no one would have predicted this. But there has been an incredible collapse of parties within the last year in France. So the ground was fertile for this kind of change. What does this runoff with these very two different candidates, but also considered outsiders, really symbolize?
Well, I mean, if you had told me a year ago that you're going to see Emmanuel Macron in the second round of the French presidential election versus Marine Le Pen, I would have told you, Frederica, you don't know a thing about French politics. This would not have happened in a normal election cycle. France is like the U.S. in the sense that it's got these two main parties, center-left, center-right. And for the last however many decades, they've been sharing power and alternating amongst themselves. And now you have a candidate who's a centrist, who's an independent, who's not affiliated with a party, that's Emmanuel Macron, and you've got the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen. It's just totally abnormal for French politics. It speaks to this particular moment with the collapse of mainstream parties. François Fillon, socialist president, that's the center-left, just collapsed. His presidency was a failure by any respect. 4% approval ratings at some point. I mean, when do you ever see that? Abysmal.
So if you are a European neighbor, if you are Belgium, if you are, you know, in Europe, how worried are you about the potential outcome here? Or is there a sense of hope or anticipation that there will be good alliances, good relations?
Well, I think what's happening is if you're a European leader and you are concerned about preserving the European project and you're worried already about impending Brexit, then you are concerned about the possibility that Marine Le Pen will become president because she's very anti-EU. She wants to take France out of the single currency, so leave the euro, go back to the franc, the former French currency, leave the Schengen zone, that's the zone of free movement. So any American tourist who's traveled to France has noticed that they can travel freely into Belgium, into Italy, into Spain, all these neighboring countries. Yeah, she wants to potentially end that and then withdraw France from the European Union. So European leaders are very concerned about her. They were looking at these results with a great deal of, I think, anxiety and nervousness. I think if she had come in first, which she isn't and which she hasn't.
Because apparently it's neck and neck.
It's neck and neck. She's a couple percentage points down, according to the BFM TV ILAB numbers that we're using right now here on CNN. So she's second. So they're breathing a sigh of relief. They're thinking Emmanuel Macron is in the lead. And I think, objectively speaking, it's hard to see her path to victory here. Because you got to crunch the electoral math. We don't have an electoral college, but you have to do the math, and the numbers are more favorable, I believe, to Emmanuel Macron.
So if there's that trepidation from European neighbors, then what was the appeal? What is the appeal for French men and women who are voting, who who have now dictated this outcome?
I think there are two things. I think, first of all, French people have for years now been worried about the direction of the country. They have this sense of lost grandeur. You know, French people are like Americans in the sense that they believe their country has something to say to the world and should be a leading country in the world. You know the phrase, the shining city on the hill, that you use here a lot in American politics? French have their own equivalent of that, and they believe that should be the case for France, that it should be exemplary in many respects and leading the pack internationally, and that's not happening. Hasn't happened for decades. You know, economic growth is stagnant in France. Unemployment hovering at 10%. So you've got this general sense of we're not happy with our country. That's one thing, and that feeds into the people who want to just break the political system, like Marine Le Pen. The other thing is...
But both candidates do represent change, right?
They do represent change in different ways. I mean, he represents change, Emmanuel Macron, in the sense that he's an independent. Having said that, he has come through the very standard traditional French political path. He went through the French Public School of Administration, which has trained and provided all the recent French presidents. He's very much in that mold, even though he's now managed to say, I'm not with one party or the other.
And as a finance minister for President Hollande.
But for only 2 years, a short time.
All right, well, those 2 years may mean something, right?
They may matter, yeah.
Cyril Vanier, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We're going to have much more right after this.